Good evening, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, depending on where you are. And let me just welcome everyone to this the session today. Before we start, I just wanted to, not only welcome you all back to the Ubuntu Symposium, the Menengage ongoing symposium. We go until June, but I also wanted to give you some of information about what the features we have today. We don't have a simultaneous interpretation, but we do have a system of translation, an automatic translation feature that is called Wordly, and you can access that by clicking on the live streaming. It's a live streaming system. So if you click on the live streaming line that you see on your screen, and then you'll be able to choose your language. So there are a number of languages available, and the way it does, it provides written translation. So you have a split screen. You can see the panelists speaking in English, but you can have the translation simultaneously. So I hope this is helpful, not only for Spanish, but other languages as well. So I want to give this information in Spanish for those who are attending, especially participants from Colombia that have joined. Buenos días a todos en Colombia, sobre todo, que hablan en español. Queremos decirles que tenemos un sistema de traducción, no es interpretación simultánea, pero es una traducción de este sistema de live streaming, ¿no? Si ustedes hacen el clic, ¿no? en la tarjeta que aparece de live streaming, y ahí van a poder elegir el idioma, en el caso del español, y ahí la pantalla se va a dividir en dos. De un lado, los ponentes hablando en inglés, pero al otro lado tendrán la traducción al español. Y yo espero que esto facilite el hecho de que no tenemos interpretación simultánea para esta sesión. Y muchísimas gracias. Como había dicho, el simposio va hasta junio. I'm sorry, now I'm going to go back to English. So the Ubuntu Symposium goes on until June, started in November. If you are a social media savvy person and you want to tweet while we during the session, you can use our hashtags of the Ubuntu Symposium and or the Simposio Ubuntu en español. And without any other matter, I would like to pass the word back to Hernando or Maria and have a wonderful session today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Magali. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. We are going to start our panel today, and we are from Colombia, from Ireland, from many places. Yes, from Uruguay. I have my students today from my university because we have class and this time, so I hope they are here and they can enjoy this. Very, very welcome. I just want to say that the aim of this panel is to share with the researchers and practitioners lessons learned from our combined work on gender-transformative relationships and sexuality education with young people addressing masculinities and gender equality. This panel will be addressed with multiple stages of needs of assessment, co-design, and evaluation process across the continents, in Europe, South America, and Uruguay with Alejandra, our college from the Republica University, and Southern Africa. We would like to tune to hear the experience of other researchers and programmers on engaging men, boys, or young men in this relationship and sexuality education program at the end. I am Hernando Muñoz Sanchez from Colombia, from the Antioquia University, and I am part of this team. You know, we are going to have the possibility to do the same program, to the same research here in Colombia, but the pandemic stopped us. But it's going to be something like Alejandra is going to present. The panel speakers, I want to introduce Dr. and Professor Maria Lohan, who is the leader of this team, to present the speakers.
Thank you very much, Hernando. Well, I'll just begin with telling you a little bit about the background of why we put this panel together. And the main reason why we put a panel together on engaging men and boys in gender-transformative relationship and sexuality education is, well, first and foremost, it's about bringing out the best in boys. And it's about engaging with young men, therefore, in high-quality relationship and sexuality education in ways that enhance their opportunities for to learn about positive relationships and role model positive masculinities. And second, and equally important, it's about recognizing that men have important roles in the contribution towards women and girls' sexual and reproductive health and rights. That men and boys can be enablers or inhibitors of the rights of women. And it's really about generating that dialogue about gender equality as part of relationship and sexuality education, since it's such a key determinant, making it part and parcel of what we do in the classroom. And today we're going to hear about a program of work centered around this If I Were Jack program, which a large team has been involved in developing at Queen's University, Belfast. But also, as you will hear, it's growing legs really in terms of new adaptations and new versions in other parts of the world that are developed with young people and with collaborators in those parts of the world. So it can be quite different in its reincarnations. And some core features, though, of the program so far is that it's based around interactive video dramas that really tries to get to the heart of young people's perspectives on these issues. It's designed to be gender transformative in that in If I Were Jack, it tells the story of an unintended pregnancy from a young man's perspective. So it's designed to kind of challenge and help young people think through themselves, through the gender stereotypes and ways of challenging gender inequality in their own lives in terms of who is responsible for safe and positive relationships. It also reflects comprehensive relationship and sexuality education, and so therefore based around the idea of equipping young people with the information and skills, or helping them to find the information and skills that they need for healthy, positive relationships. So today on the panel, we're proud to introduce our team here. First of all, we have Alejandra Lopez Gomez, Professor Alejandra Lopez Gomez, who is director of the Center for Gender, Reproduction and Sexuality at the Universidad de la República in Uruguay, Montevideo. And we also have my colleagues, Dr. Áine Aventin, who is, you can give us a wave there, Áine, is a Vice-Chancellor's Fellow at Queen's University, Belfast, who is working with a team together with Mark Tomlinson, Professor Mark Tomlinson, who's director of the Institute for Life Course Research at Stellenbosch, and is also a joint appointment at Queen's with us as a professor of maternal and child health. We'll also hear about, they will speak about programs respectively in Uruguay and in South Africa. I will also talk about our program in Ireland and the UK, together with my colleague, Dr. Kathryn Gillespie, who sadly won't join us today, but she will be with us in spirit. And then I'd like to introduce Martin Robinson, Dr. Martin Robinson, who is a research fellow at Queen's as well. And he and I will talk about an adaptation of the program we have made for use in young offender institutes in the UK. After we have that panel, we're also very proud to introduce our two expert commentators. And that is Áine van der Vloek from Rutgers in the Netherlands, and Chandra-Mouli, who is the lead for Adolescent and Reproductive and Sexual Health at WHO. And Áine and Chandra, you are both very welcome to join us today too. Thank you. And so that's the background to the panel and who we are. So back to you, Hernando.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you very much. I think it was better for you to present the presenters, our inviters, because the last name's pronunciation for you is much better. I just want to say that we're going to have like 3 parts of this panel. The first, after Maria introduced us and give us the background, I'm going to lead the panel discussion. And in the panel discussion, each team of research groups, I am going to ask them some questions, and we're going to talk as a round table, you know, to have a conversation about the research they develop. So that's the first part. Then I'm going to invite the expert comments, and then I will invite questions from the audience if you have from the public or lesson learned or some comments, whatever. So this is going to be, you know, our session, our methodology, and I think I love to learn today from this many countries from these parts of the world. And Men Engage is very, very commitment with the masculinities, working with women and to involve men and boys to eradicate any kind of violence against women. So we are so happy to present a little bit to change masculinities to the best men, best boys. So I'm going to invite the team, Maria, if you can start to talk about the experience of this research. And I'm going to start. Why did you decide to develop or evaluate the RSE programming with men and boys? Why? And I'm going to do like that with each group.
Okay, thanks, Hernando. Well, our answer to that really was that teachers and schools and pupils asked us to. And this was because many years ago, really what we were doing was just researching the issue of how do young men think about relationship and sexuality education, but especially how do young men think about an unintended pregnancy in their lives? What would it mean to them? What sort of decisions would they make? How do they think about it? And to do this, though, we used a novel methodology that we imitated really from a group who were working in Australia in Flinders. And they had developed this interactive video drama just as a research tool to find out about what young men thought about this hypothetical situation. And I was so impressed with what they had done. I replicated this approach in Ireland, first of all, and then in Northern Ireland in the UK. And what we really found was that it was a great way to get into the minds of young men and to help them open up these conversations in their lives. But anyway, we went on to write interesting papers and so on about that, which we really enjoyed. But what happened then was really teachers came back to us and said, no, don't go away just with your papers. Come back here. We think this would really work for relationship and sexuality education. This film was so engaging for them. This helped us to open up the discussion in a way that they engaged with. And so we did that. We went away and we started to develop a relationship and sexuality education program using the interactive video drama as a kind of a hook as part of it. So ultimately, the answer to the question really is that we were impressed by the demand from school. And then when we went to the literature, we were impressed by the argument that high quality relationship and sexuality education is a right for young people. We were impressed by the research evidence that we could find that said that, okay, relationship and sexuality education is only one important element of what can change good relationships or what can generate positive SRHR. But it's an important element. And so that's why.
Thank you, Maria. I just want to ask Magali, please, if quick, you can explain again how to get the translation, because my students are asking us about that. Can you please?
Yes, I just put it in the chat, the explanation about accessing the live streaming system. Okay. So they have to go on the icon about live streaming and where the recording is, and there it would appear the wordly, the live streaming feature.
Okay, thank you, Magali. I want to ask now the same question to Alejandra. How was it in Uruguay? Why did you decide to develop and evaluate this program?
Hello, everybody. Hello, thank you very, very much, Hernando and Maria. Well, Uruguay developed a very strong human rights agenda during the past 15 years, and especially managed to advance and legally protect, not without contradiction and controversies, human rights related to sexual and reproductive health, education, and gender equality. Instead of that, the rate of adolescent pregnancy was really very high. So between 2016 and 2019, I participated in the technical advice to the National Strategy for the Prevention of Unintended Pregnancy in Adolescents. That was an intersectorial and innovative working group with the aim of preventing and reducing the high teenage pregnancy rate from a human rights and gender approach. However, we recognize the involvement of adolescent boys was relatively neglected. The strategy engaged in dialogue with Latin American and European experiences to strengthen its capacity and to learn from good practices and evidence-based interventions. We identified the need of developing educational interventions that include adolescents, boys and girls in the prevention of unprotective and non-consensual sexual behavior, and to develop sexual and reproductive decision-making skills. So we need to involve boys and adolescents, boys, especially in the prevention of unintended pregnancy. So for us, in this context, we met Maria Lohan and her team at the Queen's University of Belfast, and especially we know about the If I Were Shack program. So we decided to adapt it for the Uruguayan context. From the very beginning, we felt that the If I Were Shack project and with its adaptations for the Uruguayan context was an excellent platform to engage adolescent boys from a gender-transformative approach, but not only for Uruguay, as you say before, also for other Latin American countries, So we try to work together with Colombia and with other countries in the region. And we are working on this in this process, very exciting, very interesting. And it's we think that it's very, very necessary to involve actively boys, young boys in the sexual and reproductive health and rights agenda, especially in the decision-making process in our countries in Latin America.
Thank you, Alejandra. And I'm going to pass the word to the team in South Africa, Áine and Jack and Mark. Please go ahead.
Her mic is switched off, but it must be because she can't
maybe
switch
Mark.
it on. Maybe Mark. Would you like to?
Mark, would you like to answer? Áine,
Same
do you
problem.
have the mic off?
There, that's better. Áine, can
Okay.
you now? Yeah.
Yes.
We couldn't unmute ourselves.
Now I can.
Okay,
I'm in now. Yeah, it was asking for permission. So hello everybody. It's lovely to be here. My name is Áine Aventin. I'm joining you from quite a snowy Ireland today. But it's really lovely to be here. So to answer the question, really the key driver. So, I'm leading this project in South Africa and Lesotho, along with Mark Tomlinson, who'll speak to you later on, and his team at Stellenbosch University. But the key driver really in moving this project forward in Southern Africa was the fact that unintended teenage pregnancy and HIV and other sexually transmitted infections rates remain high, despite the fact that there have been 2 decades of targeted investment in sexual and reproductive health in the Southern African region. And just to give you, those of you who aren't familiar with the region, sort of an idea of the figures involved, really, like as many as 20% of women in the region will have their first child by the age of 19. And around half of those pregnancies are unintended. So, that's big figures. Around 10% of women have unintended pregnancies around about the age of 19 or before they're 19. And Southern Africa is also the region that's most impacted by HIV. And in 2019, it was the region with the highest numbers of new HIV infections. So, the issues continue. And particularly relevant here, we're talking about, gender-transformative programming. So of particular relevance was that we know that there were really stark gender disparities in relation to HIV risk in Southern Africa. And with the risk among adolescent girls aged 15 to 19, 6 times higher than among their male counterparts, 6 times higher. So, reflecting that, there has been a lot of programming, as I said, over the last couple of decades, targeting adolescent girls in relation to sexual and reproductive health. And obviously that's needed and very much welcomed and continues to be welcomed. And it seems that these programs have, to some degree, succeeded in reducing HIV rates among females. But what we see is that actually a lack of interventions targeting boys may also be contributing to increases in incidence among adolescent males. So there was a 2017 South African study that reported that while girls aged 15 to 24 experienced a 26% reduction in HIV incidence over the preceding 5-year period, boys actually saw an increase of 11%. So what this suggests is, yes, this kind of programming is needed in this region. And this programming that's been targeted on girls has really made a difference. But it also suggests that actually what we need is programming that targets boys as well as girls. So we saw then that as an opportunity to move forward with this program that we're involved in now. So because, I had been involved with the development and evaluation of the FIRO-JAC intervention. So because we had found high acceptability among young men in Ireland and the UK, with the JAC intervention, as Maria has mentioned earlier on, we just thought that it would be a really good opportunity then to adapt this intervention for use in this new context, as Alejandra and Hernando are involved in doing also. So we made connections with Mark and his team in South Africa, and joined up with their networks and formed new networks in Lesotho, and Lesotho has the second highest prevalence of HIV in the world. So we embarked on this program then in that context to develop and evaluate an adapted version of the JAC program for there. And we will tell you a little bit later on about how that is progressing. Thanks.
Okay, Áine. Thank you very much. And now the same question for the prison team, Martin and Maria. Go ahead, please.
Thanks very much, Hernando. Yes, well, our answer to why we developed it for prisons is a little bit like why we developed it for schools, actually, because the answer is the prisons asked us to. So the prison system in Northern Ireland asked us to bring in If I Were Jack for use in the Young Offender Institutes in Northern Ireland. And they did so really because they are aware of the very high instance of, I suppose, social deprivation amongst the young men in the residence of prisons, and the very complex health and social care needs of these men in particular, including in relation to sexual and reproductive health. And also they were so aware of the statistic that really the main reason, or sorry, the largest predictor of a child becoming involved in the criminal justice system is if they have a parent, and that's usually a father, in prison. So they were very keen to try and interrupt that intergenerational transmission of values that was leading to criminality and imprisonment being passed on through the generations. But it was also because ultimately the young men in prison asked us themselves for this program, because we did go in with the If I Were Jack program into prisons. And what we found was that they really liked it. What they really liked about it was actually getting the opportunity to talk about sex and relationships and intimacy and their desires around that. And that for them was the very first time they had an opportunity to do so. And what they also liked was the idea of the films and the ways in which that engaged with them. And they got a lot of fun out of that. But they also told us that, you know, this Jack lad in this program, look, he's way too young. He's way too inexperienced. And furthermore, they weren't interested in preventing an unintended pregnancy. In fact, it was what they were really interested in doing was becoming fathers at any age. Mm-hmm. But they wanted to be good fathers. They wanted to be better fathers than they had themselves. And they saw it as the key hook to actually turn themselves around. They kind of really told us themselves that really they wanted to be good men, and seeing themselves as good men was the route for rehabilitation. And being a good prospective father was one way of doing this. So if you like, it was the prison and the young men that convinced us that they really needed a program like this. But moreover, we needed to come back out and redesign a program with the young men in prison that really spoke to them, that was centered on their lives. So that's what we decided to do.
Thank you, Maria. And I think that you have say all the groups, all the researchers. I want to add something like a reflection. It's because we need to, you know, to say the men, the boys, that they are part of the sexuality, and they take decisions too, not only women. So that's very important that they be responsible for that decisions to have sex and to get the possibility to get pregnant. That's the men's responsibility too. Sexual health and sexual reproduction is not only for women. So that's a big reason, I think, to have. I don't know if some of you, one of you, want to say something quick about this first question, something that you really want to add, or you forgot, or no, or we just pass to the other one. What do you say? I am given an opportunity. Okay. Let's pass to the second one and see how is it going. How have you engaged boys, young boys, men so far, and what is the gender transformative component? Because it's very important, this gender transformative component. How, because it's not easy to engage young men or young women, but young men is a little bit difficult. I want to start now with Áine and Mark.
Okay.
Mark, I think, do you want to answer that one?
Oh, sorry. Yes. Sorry, was I on mute? Busy talking on mute again. Thanks, Áine. Hi, everybody, and great to be here. So yes, I'm the co-director of the Institute for Life Course Health Research at Stellenbosch University in Cape Town, as well as an appointment at Queen's, and really lovely to be here. Maybe just briefly to also say, I just want to say, just to acknowledge the broader team. You know, obviously this is a bigger team, and Stefan Rabi, Jackie Stewart, Sarah Skeen, all part of the study, and really importantly, Áine and Sarah have following on from this work now gone on to develop a larger study that's funded by the UK MRC, which is fantastic again in both countries, and so importantly, that just very briefly about the two contexts. They were also chosen. Both Áine's painted some of that picture, but they're very similar in some respects and incredibly different in others. You know, Lesotho is a small country. The entire country's population is smaller than smaller than Cape Town. It's a lot of rural areas, landlocked country. It's a low-income country, whereas South Africa is an upper middle-income countries, and there's quite different dynamics that have arisen historically over the years. So it was the two countries were chosen to really speak to some of the issues in the region. And I think the way in which we embarked upon this, we used an intervention mapping approach, which is being used by Áine. I think she'd see herself as an expert on that, but I think she is. And involved separate work, doing it separately in both countries. And again, not assuming, that they were the same in any way. And it involves setting up intervention, adaptation, planning, advisory groups of both community members, experts, professionals, again, in both countries. We have a long history of using advisory groups, whether it's community advisory groups, randomized control trial advisory groups, but also adolescent advisory groups. And I think in the last 5 to 10 years, increasingly trying to live that motto of engaging adolescents from the start in, as Maria was also kind of sort of describing nicely, asking adolescents and people what they want, what they need, how they would like things to be. We also conducted a systematic review of the literature, and this involved like on determinants of condom use among adolescents in South Africa, and then focus groups with 8 groups of adolescents and four groups of adults. Anyone who wants publications from that, just you can, Áine will be able to share them with you. And in terms of the gender transformative component, that's really the same as for the JAC intervention. Again, we're taking that as the basis and adapting it for a new context, but that really is the basis of it, and giving young women and young men opportunities to discuss, their roles and responsibilities in relation to safe and to positive, sex, and not assuming that either JAC intervention has the answers or that we have the answers, but really engaging with them, because I think that knowledge, kind of resides with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I'm going to continue with Alejandra. Alejandra, the same question.
Hello. Okay.
Yes.
Well, as I say before, look, Uruguay developed a very important agenda in human rights and gender issues, especially on sexual and reproductive health and rights. And for its process, the role of the social movements especially feminist movements and LGTB, sexual diversity movements and young people were very, very important, and also the academic institutions. But the participation of the men and young boys in the transformation of the inequality gender relationship was, I think that was low. So look, to transform these gender inequalities, we need involvement, we know that, and to transform hegemonic masculinities in different contexts. We know that gender is systemic, we know that gender is relational, is institutional, is also obviously incorporated into subjectivities. So we must recognize that we need to work in all these levels to impact in the social transformation and the individual level. So we sought to engage with young people from a wide variety of backgrounds, and is a key issue for us, because we must take into account important differences and inequalities relating to social classes, educational level, territorial context of residence, religion, gender identity, and all their intersections, combining all these levels. So we must work with a variety of young people, boys, and from different contexts. And for us, I think that the one of the key issues is how to adapt this program, if I was shocked, in Uruguay, that could impact and be adequate for this diversity of young people. As you know, Latin America is the region more unequal of the world. Mm-hmm. We have a gap, very important gap between poor and rich people, and between also other inequalities in gender and other dimensions. So we need to have gender transformative approach connected to these other inequalities. So it's gender inequalities, but also other inequalities, and also to have a perspective that young men and boys are not an homogeneous group. They are very diverse, and we must work with all of them, and to have a perspective of inclusion of diversity in our interventions. So I think that this is this is our approach, and also at the same time our main challenge to the work that we are doing now.
Thank you, Alejandra. Thank you very much. Maria and Martin, both of you, the prison and the research with the other group. So go ahead.
Well, I'll begin with the Jack stuff as well in the UK and Ireland on that question. And it's just about how we engage young people, and really in common with Alejandra's work in Uruguay and Áine and Mark describing in Southern Africa. I would say that really we've tried to put young people at the heart of how we develop it. So right from the start, we've had a young people's advisory group to help us develop the components of the research, of the intervention, and also to help us to assess it at each point in the way. So one of the things in this format today is we're not really showing you the program, but I think Martin has put web links into the chat box if you want to look at the program in your own time afterwards. But just to tell you, it has some key components, and we've been talking so far about this interactive video drama. So young people helped us to script that. They helped us to also choose the actors, choose the locations, so on, so that young people could identify with it. In common with what Alejandra is saying there, social class is a very important point. So it was like also making sure that we didn't alienate underprivileged children in how we describe how they appeared on screen and so on. The second part really was in relation to developing the activities, the classroom activities that are followed up after the interactive drama. So this 4-week kind of program involved in this. And the young people helped us to choose and refine those parts of the program as well. So there are things like pause, rewind in terms of understanding how could the film have been different? How would you have seen it different? And controversial statements and so on. And young people all helped us to design that. They also helped us design the teacher training component of it, because teacher training is also an important part. So helped us to understand what do they need from teachers. And they also helped us to develop the parental component, because right from the start, we had done research on how parents talk to their children about sexuality and relationships, and also how do young people talk to their parents about these issues. And that helped us to inform the parental component too. So now just think about the gender transformative component. Well, I picked out one quote here from the focus groups that we had done with young people after they had received the program. And I think it kind of tells you a little bit about how the young people were discussing these issues in the classroom. So, for example, one girl says, boys like always seem ready, but like if it's your first time, like you're obviously going to be scared. And then another guy in the class responds, that's sexist. And then another guy comes in after that and says, I, and I is a very Northern Ireland word, I. But then girls sort of have the stereotype that boys are always comfortable. And then the girls sort of, when they feel ready, they think it's just going to happen because they think, oh, the boys are ready to do it. But the boys mightn't feel comfortable. The boys go through the same thought processes of all of it, and they still need to think about it as well. So that's the kind of young people working it out. And I think that's what we hope that this program gives the opportunity for young people to work out some of those issues for themselves. Thanks.
Okay, Martin, do you want to add something?
I could add about the development of If I Were a Dad, and much like the development of If I Were Jack, it focused on a co-design process where we engaged young men in prisons, going to them on the where they were and asking them what they wanted to see. Once again, it was important to them to see people like them in the videos. That's what really was the appeal of getting the content across, that the people in the prisons needed to identify with the people on the screen. The program, once again, centered around those short video dramas, and that all the scripts were developed with young men in the prisons, and so that the scripts themselves were emblematic of their lives, and they felt that the situations brought up were realistic, and there were realistic points of change that they could go through. And to make the videos, a production team was brought in, and like with the young people in the If I Were Jack intervention, the young men in prisons got to weigh in on the casting and say whether or not they identified with, in the case of If I Were Dad, the main character Jay and his partner Lisa. The program itself, being centered around If I Were Dad and fatherhood, was because the young men said that was the main hook of the program, that they didn't want to avoid unintended pregnancy, they wanted to be good dads. So the whole project and its content was centered around what young men said to us what was important to them. We developed 4 main themes to cover in the program, and these were being a man, being a partner, being a father, and future fatherhood or making a change. These main modules covered what was gender transformative about the intervention. The program was aimed to appeal to them in each of these modules, but also to challenge their attitudes and behaviors in relation to being a man, being a partner, and being a father by looking at issues around masculinities, looking at issues around sex and intimacy, and looking at issues around being a father. So understanding the needs of their children, what is good parenting, what is good co-parenting, and the skills and strategies that they might use. And by tackling that sort of gender transformative component in each of the modules, we let men dictate themselves how they would like to make a change based on gender factors in their own lives.
Thanks.
I don't know if one of you want to add something or to ask to your college there about the experience or something that you want to know about until we have now. You have to ask something to the others? Maria, Áine, Martin, Alejandra, Mark, or...
I think we know all about each other, Hernando, at this stage, is the problem.
That's the problem. Okay.
We've been hanging around for a long time.
Yes. So we're going to continue it. And, you know, I want to ask you, the 4 groups, what stages are you at and highlights men so far, and what, you know, you funding, what highlights, what you want to emphasize, you know, what are the benefits, expecting benefits of this situation, this programming, this experience. And I want to ask you just 3, 1, 2, or 3, no more than 3. Okay. 3 examples, okay? So we are going to start with Alejandra. Alejandra, what are you highlights or fundings and benefits or expected benefits about this?
Okay, the first one I like to say is that for us it was a challenge to build this project in Uruguay, to develop the architecture of the project with the participation of the creation of the advisory committee and the adolescent advisory committee, the institutional supports, and the fundraising strategies. I must say that all of that is a hard work, and so we began to work on that, on this architecture and designing this strategy 1 year ago, or more than that, in 2019, and this is a project that I think that to really to have impact in social level, we need to involve many actors and to develop a strong strategy at the national field. So this is the first. We are in the first phase of the project. No? The second, we translate the instrument into Spanish, and we subtitle the video, the interactive video drama into Spanish for showing and discussing with many groups in Uruguay. So we completed the past year. The last year we completed the focus group with teachers, with health professionals, with fathers, with mothers, And now we are conducting the groups with adolescents during February and March. And so it was a very hard work. I like to take this opportunity to thank the members of the committees and the institutions that have given us their support, like the United Nations Population Funds, the Pan American Health Organization, the government of Montevideo, the National Administration of Education, and the National Administration of Public Health Services in Uruguay, and also my university, the University of the Republic of the Universidad de la República, and the researcher team that is working very hard on this project. And we have some results to show with you or to share with you. And I must say that the most important for us at this moment is that the results show us a broad acceptability of the project, of the proposal, and its instruments. In all the focus groups, fathers, mothers, teachers, health professionals say that the project is relevant, it's sensitive, is innovative for sexual education, involves not only men, or young boys and young people, but also families, health system, educational institutions, and from a comprehensive approach. And I think that this is very important because we are talking about very sensitive issues like maternity, paternity, abortion, adoption, and the influence of peers, families, gender norms, health professionals in the decision-making process. So I think that the focus groups show us that we are working with very complex and sensitive issues, and we need to involve and to put together these different visions on the table. And so this is very important for us to work to move to the next stage of the process.
Okay, thank you, Alejandra.
Sorry, Hernando, can I just interrupt you? Given that there are so many Spanish speakers in the audience, and given that it's not working, the translation, could you, after each presentation, give a 1-minute summary? I think it's just respectful to the 20-25 young people in the group.
Yes.
Because they've tried very hard, they're staying in, and it's really not working.
Okay, thank you, Chandra.
Let me just jump in for a second. We just restored, there was really a technical problem. I'm really sorry. We just restored the live streaming service on top of your screen. Near when you see recording live, there's custom live streaming, and that should give the option to, and also to everyone, there is a translation live, attend wordly. There's also a link that Twitch Tamizan from our tech support has posted to the chat box.
Gracias, ¿puede explicar en español?
Yo voy a explicarle en español.
¿Que lo explique?
Muy bien, chicos. Las personas que hablan español, Chandra nos ha hecho un llamado de atención que es muy importante, y es que ¿qué estaba pasando con la traducción para ustedes? Había un problema técnico y ya Magali nos dijo que se ha solucionado. Entonces, miren esta aquí a la parte superior izquierda, cuando ustedes están de frente en su pantalla, al lado donde dice recording, que es grabando, dice live, y ahí pueden hacerlo, ¿de acuerdo? Por favor, dime.
May I use 1 minute to translate my last answer in 1 minute into Spanish for the people?
Okay.
Yeah?
O usen
Hola.
el link que pusieron. Muy bien, Alejandra va a decir lo último en español para que...
Muy rápidamente.
Ok, dale.
Gracias, querido. Bueno, mis queridos amigos latinoamericanos y latinoamericanas, la verdad que para mí es un gusto hablarles en español. Pero bueno, les voy a rápidamente a decir lo que dije. A ver, el proyecto If I Were Jack en Uruguay comenzó a instrumentarse sobre fines del 2019 a través de la Universidad de la República. Uno de los retos más importantes que hemos tenido, un aprendizaje fundamental, ha sido el cómo construir esa arquitectura del proyecto con la creación del comité de asesor de expertos, con el comité de adolescentes, con adolescentes de todo el país, que estos dos comités a quienes aproveché a agradecerles muy especialmente su trabajo durante un año complejo como fue el año pasado para todos nosotros, que se han comprometido en el trabajo y que han impulsado también el involucramiento de instituciones que apoyan el proyecto, como el Fondo de Población de las Naciones Unidas, la Organización Panamericana de la Salud, los servicios de salud del Estado y la Administración Nacional de Educación Pública y el Gobierno de Montevideo. Para nosotros es parte de esa arquitectura del proyecto tan importante. Hemos traducido los instrumentos del proyecto, le hace subtitulado el video interactivo If I Were Jack y los formularios que están encriptados en el video al español para poder ser puestos en discusión a través de grupos de discusión, focus group, con adolescentes, profesores de enseñanza media, profesionales de la salud, padres y madres con hijos adolescentes. Hemos planificado un total de 16 grupos, hemos concluido la fase de grupos con adultos en estos distintos grupos que les digo, y estamos ahora conduciendo los grupos con adolescentes. El principal resultado, les diría, es la amplísima aceptabilidad de la propuesta, el que es muy bienvenida, la valoración de que estamos frente a una propuesta que no existe en nuestro país, que es sensible, que es adaptable al contexto uruguayo, que es transformadora de las relaciones sociales de género y que es innovadora desde el punto de vista del involucramiento de la gente joven en los procesos de toma de decisiones en materia de vida sexual y vida reproductiva. Ese es uno de los principales aciertos de cómo generar habilidades para la toma de las decisiones sexuales y reproductivas en la gente joven. Eso fue básicamente lo que dije.
Muy bien, gracias Alejandra, y mis estudiantes van a estar muy felices de que lo hiciste en español. Gracias a Chandra. Oh, sorry again. Thank you, Chandra, for the suggestion, and my students are so happy for that. And now they have the translation, I think. Okay, Maria. 3 examples, 3 benefits, 3 highlights, 3 emphasizes for the UK and Ireland program.
Yes, okay. So in the UK and Ireland, we are just at the stage of finishing a UK-wide randomized controlled trial of the intervention. And I don't have the final results of that so far, but so far in all of our other trials and other types of research that we have done on this so far, what we have learned is that the intervention is acceptable and highly engaging. It's feasible to implement in schools, in large part because we've worked with a variety of stakeholders who helped us to get it into schools as well. It's affordable. In UK terms, it costs around £14 per pupil to implement in schools. And so far, the effectiveness data is quite promising in relation to promoting a safe sex and reducing unintended pregnancies. But I think one negative point about the program is that it has a very heteronormative bias, because the kind of starting point of this program originally had been around unintended pregnancy. And it does deal with much broader relationship issues, but it's hooked around that idea of a young man, first of all, experiencing that. So there's a heteronormative tone to it. Now, the only way we can get around that is to acknowledge it And so teachers say at the outset, look, we acknowledge that this is a story about this situation, but it's not supposed to be exclusively about heterosexual relationships. So it's a way of acknowledging and bringing in all other types of relationships as well. And I suppose it's only supposed to be part of relationship and sexuality education, not the total. It's a part of it. So that's really what I'd like to say.
Okay, Martin, did you want to say something about the prison? And Maria, you can participate in this part too. The three examples, three emphasizes. One thing, when I have to, you hear me to start, okay, it's because the time is over. Okay, go ahead, Martin.
So just speaking to the stage that we're at, we've completed the intervention co-development that I mentioned in, earlier on, and a pilot implementation and evaluation phase in a prison in Northern Ireland and a prison in Scotland. The evidence-based program is now up and running in those two institutions quite successfully. But as Hernando has prompted, 3 take-home findings from that pilot evaluation phase. We conducted interviews and focus groups with young men, with the delivery partners, the youth workers in the prisons, and with prison staff. So I'll highlight from each of the groups. The feedback from the young men was that they found the program useful, and they found the program engaging more so than other courses that they had on offer, and they felt genuinely changed by taking part. One even said that he felt that if he had done the If I Were Dad intervention before he went to prison, he wouldn't have ended up there. He would have made a change beforehand. And one young man on quite mature reflection said that he really hated the program because it wrapped all his issues up into one ball and showed them to him. But he loved taking part, and he recognized that he needed to do the program. The feedback from our delivery partners, youth workers, as part of Bernardo's, a charity here in the UK, they said that they had previously run parenting support programs, but they hadn't had an opportunity to engage in an early intervention program like this that takes place before men are potentially parents, and that they were very excited that this would lead to them being able to deliver to multiple groups throughout the year. One said that they were really relieved because they were a wee bit concerned that it's like shutting the stable door when the horse is already bolted. And the fact that so many of the fellas in the prisons are already fathers at such a young age, but was very encouraged that men seemed to be engaged and did want to learn about what it would like to be a father and possibly make a positive change. And finally, the feedback from the prison service themselves was overwhelmingly positive, and they seemed very keen to become skilled in delivering the kind of program that If I Were a Dad was. One of the prison governors highlighted that the program enhanced the skill set of the prison officers, shows their staff in a new light, and softens the delivery from officers and helps them build relationships with the boys in prison. Overall, I think the results across the program were really good and very encouraging, and we can really expect benefits in terms of change to young men's behavior, but we won't know until a later evaluation phase and see what happens whenever men leave the prison.
Okay, thank you, Martin. And now, Martin and Áine, if you want to finish this part, and we just pass to the hour 4 question, and then we split our commentaries. So, Mark and Áine.
Thanks, Hernando. So yeah, so just to sort of to give you the 3 highlights, I guess. I mean, I think, you know, a big highlight for us is that this formative work told us that the adapted version of the If I Were Jack program is actually acceptable for use in South Africa and Lesotho, two completely different contexts than the one in which, or the UK and Ireland in which the Jack program was designed for. So, you know, that was hugely interesting. It was acceptable to the young people that were involved in our research and in our advisory groups, and it was acceptable to the adults and the community members that we spoke to, and also was acceptable to experts. So that was a big thing. And I just wanted to sort of, you know, a big thing I think that is important to say, because it's it might be relevant to others here today, is that we found that the key findings of this work was that adaptations were needed, as we expected, culturally focused adaptations. Just to highlight, I mean, they were all fairly minor, you know, outside of the obvious things like, you know, local actors, local settings, local languages and things like that to be used in the film itself. But also things like, it became really evident, and it's similar to what Alejandro was saying, just this need for increased focus on gender transformative elements was spoken out by the experts that we spoke to. You know, they saw the need for it. They saw a policy need for it in both the countries, and they were motivated to sort of engage with something that they saw with the potential to bring about this gender transformation. And that was really nice to see from my perspective and being involved with Jack all along, but also just to see its potential value in these countries. So that was central. And I mean, just finally, just to say, I mean, a key highlight of this, Hernando, is that this was formative, you know, largely qualitative work. But we have been funded by the medical, as Mark said, by the Medical Research Council to conduct optimization of this intervention for use in these contexts and a feasibility trial. And we see this sort of moving beyond, you know, different countries in the sub-Saharan African region, you know, and having a framework in place there that will make adaptation easier moving forward. So that's
thank you. Mark, something to say?
Nothing to add from me. Thanks, Fernando.
Okay, so we're just finished our roundtable, and we want to know if you can tell us about the key challenge or something that you struggled with, you know, what was difficult or what is the challenge or the challenges, just one or two, you know, to talk about that. And how about we start with Maria again about UK and Ireland?
Okay, thanks. I think two key challenges for us were that engaging faith-based schools. So this is the first randomized controlled trial of an intervention in the UK and Ireland, which actually involved faith-based schools. And for us, this was important because in Northern Ireland, 50% of the schools are faith-based, whether that be Protestant or Catholic by and large. So those are the two dominant religions. And so we felt it was important to engage those schools. And it wasn't easy and it involved compromise, but we thought it was important. And the second one I would like to mention is just we tried to engage parents right from the start. And we have worked at it with various iterations to varying degrees of success. I don't think we fully cracked the engaging with parents yet. And I suppose it's to say that really schools need support in this part of it. And we're keen to keep developing that part. Thank you.
Okay, Maria, thank you very much. It was so good with the time. Áine and Mark, the same question.
Thanks, Fernando. I'll just briefly touch on 2 points. I mean, the one is, I think, in working in contexts like, for example, Lesotho, but also in South Africa, is the stakeholders that you want to engage with are often incredibly busy, overloaded, and despite their best intentions, their wish to be part of it, it's actually often quite difficult simply to get them in the room, as it were. I suppose one of the advantages we had is, and I think this is not so much a challenge, but a strength, is that because of our institute's kind of location, certainly in South Africa, but also we have a long-standing body of work in Lesotho. So we have the networks, the people on the ground, the partners, the collaborators who without them, we wouldn't even be able to get in the door with the stakeholders, but it remains a challenge. And then often the issues of ethical approval are something to really be thought about, you know, sort of in many countries, obviously very kind of like well-established, where you know, ethical approval boards, institutional review boards are present and exist. But in many low-income countries, but you know, in particular, that is often a difficult thing. Again, because of our history in countries we do have the connections and now the knowledge. But because obviously it's absolutely vital to not only get ethical approval in both places, as well as in a partnership with Queen's, but equally to involve the teams on the ground with that. So we managed and we've done it, but it wasn't always easy.
Thank you. Any something to say, to add?
Sorry, thanks, Hernandez. Not much, but just to in terms of what Maria said about engaging parents, I just wanted to say that was an additional challenge, and it will be a challenge moving forward as well. I think it's a global thing that parents are difficult to engage in sexual and reproductive health education, and that was no different where we were. So it's something that we're working on moving forward. It's highly taboo in Southern African context for any kind of adult to talk to a young person or a child about sex. So we're investigating different ways of approaching that.
Okay, thank you very much. Remember that we are having time in a little bit after the commentaries about to have questions from the audience. So remember that if you want to put it in the chat, and I ask Maria, to the person who is going to read the questions, that be ready. Maybe one of
Mark.
Martin. Okay. Mark, okay,
Sorry.
he's going to do that, and because I saw some questions there. Alejandra, the same one, and you can do it in English, and then to my students, and a little time in Spanish.
Okay, very quick. So, two challenges I would like to remark. The first one is that after 15 years of government by coalition of left and center-left parties in Uruguay, we have a new political scenario, a new government since March 2020. And at the same time of the COVID context in our country, we have a new government. So the scenario is new, really, for us. So the new national administration is a coalition of right and center-right parties with a conservative agenda about sexual and reproductive health rights issues. Instead of that, we are working with these stakeholders, with these partners at the national policies. But it's a new scenario that we must take into account and not also take into account. It's a challenge for us to how to conduct this project in this new scenario. The second one is the COVID context, the pandemic context. It's a global new scenario, but also at the same time, it's a local new scenario for all of us with different impacts in the socioeconomical levels, in mental health, in sexual and reproductive health, rights, access to services, so and also education. So the world changes for all of us. And during 2020, we implement the first phase of the project in a virtual mode. And we are moving, we hope, to a hybrid way, combining virtual online activities and face-to-face activities. And this is also a new experiences for us as researchers. So I think that these are these two key challenges for us. And the third one, just only to, because I think that it's very important, is how to involve other countries in Latin America. And we are working on that with Maria, with Hernando, and it's very important for us to have a Latin American perspective on how to adapt this kind of interventions in our countries that are different between them, and the contexts are different. So it's a very huge challenge for us to involve researchers and institutions of different countries to the implementation of this initiative.
Okay. So, quick in Spanish.
Rápidamente en español decirles a las personas que nos acompañan que nosotros tenemos básicamente tres grandes retos. El primero tiene que ver con un cambio en el gobierno nacional, un país que viene hace 15 años venía con un gobierno con una perspectiva de partidos de izquierda y centroizquierda, con una agenda de derechos reconocida a nivel internacional, con una agenda particularmente importante en el área de salud sexual y reproductiva, educación sexual, acceso al aborto legal, uno de los pocos países con estas posibilidades. Ahora por suerte se ha sumado Argentina también, pero en marzo del 2020 se instala un nuevo gobierno, un gobierno de una coalición de derecha y centro-derecha, con una agenda conservadora, podríamos decir, en materia de estos temas, al mismo tiempo que se instala el COVID. Y el COVID es un escenario global, es un escenario latinoamericano, es un escenario nacional, que impacta de manera distinta en nuestros países, pero en una región desigual como es América Latina. Sabemos que el COVID tiene un fuerte impacto en agudizar las desigualdades socioeconómicas, tiene impactos en la salud mental y tiene impactos en el acceso a la salud sexual y reproductiva y a la igualdad de género. Por lo tanto, esto instala también la conducción de una investigación, de una intervención y de esta arquitectura del proyecto en una modalidad híbrida, una modalidad que combina actividades cara a cara o presenciales con actividades virtuales online, con lo que implica esto del acceso a las tecnologías, del acceso a la comunicación, del acceso a la conectividad en nuestros países. Por lo cual, estamos en un escenario que, si somos coherentes con lo que dijimos antes, de que necesitamos tener una perspectiva interseccional del género, que lo vincule, un enfoque de género, que vincule con las distintas dimensiones de la desigualdad, el contexto del COVID no es un contexto menor, es un contexto central para readecuar la implementación del proyecto al nuevo escenario. Y el tercer punto, y con eso termino, es el cómo involucramos a otros países de la región, que son diversos, que tienen agendas distintas y avances distintos en el reconocimiento de los derechos sexuales y reproductivos, en una posibilidad de desarrollo adaptado, sensible culturalmente de este proyecto y de esta intervención en otros países de la región, además de Colombia, que estamos con el compañero Hernando Muñoz impulsándolo junto con Uruguay.
Gracias. Y Martin and Maria, what about the prison project and these challenges?
Well, in schools, we take group work for granted, but actually group work in prisons was really quite a challenge. And this was especially because in prisons, the young people don't have to be friends to work in a group, but crucially, they can't be enemies. And especially in a Northern Ireland context, many of the young men in prison have been caught up in the sectarian violence of Northern Ireland. So the way we got around this has been to kind of work with the facilitators in advance to engage the young men, find out who they can work with in a group, who they can't, and do that kind of prior work before bringing them together in a group. And our youth work team that deliver the program are very skilled at doing that. And I suppose the second key challenge to us has been COVID as well. And really, COVID has stopped all group work in prisons. And you may well be aware how much young people in prisons are really being, there's a necessity to keep them in their own cells so much more than is desired because of this isolation. And I think to some extent it's gone uncovered compared to the care homes, the ways in which young people in prisons have really suffered in relation to COVID and then the lack of visits, etc. So that's the two challenges. And really, I think to overcome that, we would like to work on delivering, If I Were a Dad, this program over computers, because it's all up on the web. So there's no reason why we also couldn't do it via computers and Zoom the way we're doing this today.
Martin, something to add?
Yeah, to add very, very minimally to Maria's point about the group work, there's also a real something to acknowledge with machismo and trust in group works, not least of which in prisons, which is very as you might imagine, is very masculine environment most of the time. A lot of the young men can have issues around trusting what is said in the sessions will stay in the sessions, because everything around If I Were Dad is group-based and it deals with some sensitive topics. But the youth workers from Bernardo's that deliver the program are very highly skilled, know the young men well. Like Maria says, they know who's friends and who are enemies, and they are very good at crafting a group that's cohesive, and they like each other well enough to respect their boundaries. And also at the very top of the program, the young men themselves set their own ground rules that are all written down on a large flip chart sheet, and they agree themselves, this is the rules that we're all going to stick to. And they're quite good at keeping themselves. If they set the rules, they follow their own rules.
Okay, thank you very much. We just finished the presentation, but I want to add another question that we don't have plan. But for the last minute, I want quick that each one of you think about the challenge to people who work with men. What this is important. What we need to do to do the best work with men, young men, boys, one challenge, one idea, because it's Ubuntu is about masculinities and gender. So maybe it's one call of the action from one of you. Okay, it's okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. I think it's a lot of think and a lot to learn. And I want to invite our first commentaries expert, Inenka. And we have time to hear them and then to pass to the questions from the audience. So Inenka, go ahead, and we are happy to listen to you about what the college says. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks a lot for all the impressive presentations. It was really wonderful to hear from all the countries how you work with the program If I Were Jack. And I'm also very impressed because all these projects are supported by research. And I think mostly in a lot of countries, there is no any funding to do research. And in this case, what I could hear, in South Africa, in Ireland, there seems to be funding to do this work. And also the way you have developed the intervention by using intervention mapping, for example, Mark told us. Well, I think it's very important to do it in a very systematic way. And to do this, there are a lot of challenges. And so I'm really proud to see how you work on these topics and how to engage all kinds of boys and young men to give them the floor and to collect their perspectives on sexuality, being a man, etc. I've also a lot of questions, but and first of all is all the countries choose for a kind of intervention to implement in schools. But we know if we want to reach a really gender transformative world in which boys and girls can explore and can be themselves with their own, choosing their own gender identity, we need also a very supportive environment, not only in the school, but also from the peers, the media, the parents, etc. So I was very delighted to hear, Maria, that you put a lot of efforts to reach parents also. And I think parents, especially for the younger adolescents, are very important. But not only parents, also the peers. So how do we create a real safe environment where boys can express their feelings, their insecurities, etc., etc., and where diversity is possible, being diverse, being in another way than other the dominant norms on being a man or being a woman. So I think this is very important. And another thing I was wondering, the teachers. For I think the teachers are the most important one to get it really implemented in the way you like to implement this intervention. How do you teach teachers who don't have a lot of time to educate them on the gender transformative approach, so you can make them more aware on gender norms, but how to deal with discussions in the group and to give space and to create a really safe learning environment. So I was wondering what is needed for the teachers, and do you succeed in this? Mm-hmm. Well, another thing is the diversity, but I think this is enough for the moment now.
Thank you very much, Ineka. Yes, you know what? I only asked about the teachers, and we as professors of the universities, we need to push that the curriculum to form teachers have all kind of these topics, because teachers get to the schools and they don't have tools to work with. So we need to do that. And our responsibility as university professors are to push the curriculums to integrate this kind of topics. But I don't say more, and I invite Chandra, our other commentaries, to go with your 4 minutes, and then we are going to hear Mark with the questions that are in the chat. Go ahead, Chandra. Thank you, Ineka.
Thank you, Hernando. And to build on what Ineka started, my congratulations as well. And I'd like to particularly draw attention to the fact that you all talked about challenges. And I'd like to recap them. In Ireland and in the UK, you talked about faith-based schools, reaching faith-based schools. You talked about working with parents and how difficult it is to get parents to talk about sexuality. From Uruguay, you talked about working with a new administration. You know, Uruguay has been seen as a beacon of progressive approaches, and now a new administration. And even though it is not anything like what we saw in these bad days of Trump, it still is very different from the previous administration. And you also mentioned, Alexandra, the norms, deeply set in these unequal gender norms. Then in the context of prisons, the whole issue of lack of trust, difficulties in organizing group work, and everything in all contexts thrown up in the air because of COVID-19. What is fascinating for me is several of these obstacles or challenges could be in other sites as well. So these are challenges that come across these sites. I'd like to make just 3 points. One is that boys face health risks as they transition into puberty. They're much more likely than girls to die of road traffic injuries and interpersonal violence. They're much more likely to use substances and die of substance overdose. They're much more likely to get into trouble with the law. Secondly, boys are increasingly being left aside. In countries like Bangladesh, in one generation, you have now more girls in university than boys. And in today's world, the type of jobs are much more girl-friendly and woman-friendly than boys. So boys are seeing girls taking off and standing on the sidelines and really angry about it. The second point is that the behavior of boys and the health of boys affects the health of girls and women, not only now, but also in the future. And this is a huge issue. So boys' health is important for boys and men, but boys' health is also important for girls and women and for families. And the big problem with this is that boys are vulnerable. You know, I'm 62 years old. In my home, I clean the toilets. I love cleaning the toilets. I cook on equal days as my wife. I have no problems of ego with her. But I can tell you that when I was 20, things were very different. I don't need to prove anything to anyone now. I know who I am. People know who I am. But when you're 20 and you're a man and everyone's looking at you to become successful and wealthy, and just like there are pressures on girls to have a child. In South Asia, you see asexual till you're married, fully sexual on your married night, and fertile in 1 year. So girls are under pressure, but boys are also under huge pressure. And that's something that we have to deal with. What do we do with boys? What are the effective approaches? One thing that needs to come through very strongly that we see with the Global Early Adolescent Study that is being led by the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health in a number of countries is we have to start early. We have to start in childhood. We have to start as soon as a child is born. We have to even start before a child is born. And we certainly have to use the window of early adolescence, because we know from brain development and from socializing research that here is an opportunity for children to walk away from the norms that they were brought up in and to move on to different things. So we have to start early. Secondly, as all of you have shown, we have to engage boys in a safe environment. I loved what Martin said. You need to sit around in a group and engage and talk. And that's the safe environment where you can challenge norms and get people to challenge norms. It's also in groups that the worst things happen. The rape and killing of the girl in Delhi 4 years ago occurred in a group. Problems occur in groups and solutions can form in groups. But we know that from brain development and cognitive development in adolescence. So we need to work with boys to address dominant masculinities, and like Gary Barker from Promundo says, toxic masculinities, but we also need to address submissive femininities in girls, and we need to work together. One thing that didn't come so strongly in your presentations, which I'd like to see you think about much more, is how do you work with parents and how do you work with communities? Mm-hmm. There's a wonderful paper by Rebecca Lundgren from a study in Nepal and it's titled, Whose Turn to Do the Dishes? So in this initiative, they worked with young boys in Nepal, and the boys in Save the Children groups, the boys clearly understood that it was not fair that when they came home, the boys could go and play outside, but the girls had to help their mothers make chapatis and wash the clothes. And the boys agreed to help their sisters, but they didn't want their friends to know, and they didn't want anyone else to know. So if we're going to change these kinds of norms and attitudes, we have to work with boys and girls. We have to work with families, and we have to change norms at the societal level. You know, men are men everywhere, but men in Norway don't bump into girls in the bus like they do in India. That's because if they do, they'll get into trouble. And that's what we need. We need also laws, policies, and their application being applied, which then shapes norms as well. So we need this multi-level work. Over to you, Hernando.
Okay, thank you very much. Wow. Netka and Chandra, thank you very much for the comments. And now I pass the word to Mark and see which questions are. And we're going to be very active answering quick because of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks, Fernando. So what I'm going to do is I've been scrolling through the chat box, and I've been trying to find early questions, and so I think I'll go through that. And obviously, if everyone wants to put in a question into the box, that's fine. I'll do my best. Also, please, Maria, Hernando, Áine, Martin, everyone else, help me if I've missed questions in that box. And if they're not addressed to anyone in particular, I'll then just open them to everybody. So the first question I could find way back, and it may have been answered, I'm not sure, was a question from Jill Gay, and it was to Alejandra about the impact on social and reproductive health of new conservatives in Uruguay. So I'm not sure if that was covered at all, but Alejandra, do you want to have a stab at answering that first up?
Okay. Well, I say some things about this issue. I think that is a very important one. Thank you very much, Jill, for your question. The changes of the new with the new administration is a new scenario, and as you say, Uruguay has a very strong policies on sexual and reproductive health, access to abortion. So the access to reproductive and sexual and reproductive services during 2020 is very difficult to evaluate now because of the context of the pandemic, and we have no information about the access to abortion. And as we know, there were some difficulties to access to the abortion services, but we have no data yet about what happened during 2020. So we are monitoring, we are observing the situation, especially because it's very important for this agenda to be sure that the sexual and reproductive rights will not come back. I don't know, how do you say, go back. So we are very strong observers about this context.
Thank you so much, Alejandra. Also, can I also just say to all the speakers, if you see, so there are many very interesting comments. In some ways, everyone is very Zoom fatigued through the pandemic. Everyone makes these things, but one of the best things for me to come out of Zoom has been the chat box. I mean, I've been on calls where I've almost wanted to, copy it and then print it out, and you'd have an interesting article. So there's amazing. So if any of the speakers see a comment that's not directly a question that you'd like to comment and speak to, please just wave your hand and I'll try and see you and speak to that. One of the other questions from Dr. Al-Hajj I saw was just around the potential role of medical doctors, religious groups, and how they potentially play a negative role in gender transformative work. Does anybody want to have a stab at making a comment on that? I mean, Maria, you touched on it in terms of your work. Does anybody want to make a comment?
I can add in
Thanks,
there, Mark, if you like. I mean, as Maria said, it's something that we encountered in Ireland in the context of doing randomised control trial in faith-based schools, and it's certainly something that has come up in Southern Africa as well as being important. So as you said, we did a systematic review looking at the determinants of condom use among adolescents, and one of the major findings of that was that religious organisations and religious representatives, sharing their views on contraceptives and condoms being a bad thing, was a great influence on many young people. In terms of medical doctors, I wouldn't just be specific about medical doctors, but I think healthcare professionals in general can have a big impact on adolescents' use and access to contraception. I mean, I think this has been shown in many, many studies across the world. Youth-friendly sexual and reproductive health services are vitally important for young people, enable to enable them to access contraceptions. But also a big thing that came out in our work in Southern Africa was, you know, the location of these centres, and also, you know, the availability of contraception within them. That if, you know, you had to go in and the whole, you know, neighbourhood was sitting there watching you go into the centre, then it would be, you know, common knowledge by the end of the day. So I think centrally both of those and many more members, it's like Chandra said, you know, the multi-level impacts are very important, and social norms are played out by all of these individuals, I think.
Thanks. Yeah. Chandra, you put your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Very quickly, you know, the disrespect of health workers when young people, whether men or women, come for contraception or STIs is very well known, and it cuts across all cultures. But I'd like to flag something else. You know, there's more and more studies about mistreatment and abuse during childbirth. Just imagine this. A woman is giving birth. She's in pain. She's lying without her clothes on a metal bed, and she's getting beaten by a nurse or a midwife or a doctor. And it's much more likely to happen if if she's poor and if she's less educated and if she's young. One of the strategies that we are proposing is labor companionship. That means somebody from the family, a partner or a mother, accompany her. And it's often health workers who refuse this. And when health workers are encouraged to accept this, young men are very willing to come and be with their partners. So I think everywhere we need to work with health workers on this. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Chandra. One of the other two questions which are related or comments in some way, which I think are very interesting because I think they speak to a meta issue perhaps. And the one is about sort of trying to train already incredibly busy teachers to now do yet another task. And then Elaine's comment about one of the dangers of going into a school is the experts to deliver something, and then basically the experts then take a step out and in fact change. I mean, one of my mentors always said to me that change kind of what happens with change is it happens in small steps in a relationship, slowly over time, with ample opportunity to practice. And that's true for anything. And so the notion of teachable moments in the classroom, and that only the teacher is going to have access to, it would be great to I think they're related in some ways as well. So anyone want to comment on that? Because I think it is quite central.
Yes, I'll come in on that if I may. Well, I do agree that equipping the teachers with the skills is really important. And it's like what you talked about adolescence. I think you've got to start early there too. And I think it is, to echo what Hernando said earlier, I think we need to build these skills into teacher education around RSE right from an earlier start. And one of the things that cross-cuts all of the work across the different countries that we talk about here is that it's a very much a multi-stakeholder piece, because we'd never get into classrooms if we didn't work with the wider group stakeholders, such as the departments of education or the departments of health, or the Council for Curriculum Authorities in different places. And it was important for all of our work to bring them in right from the start so that they had work in shaping it, but also we were thereby shaping some of their practices as well, if you like. And that dialogue was happening around what makes good relationship and sexuality education. And just on the, but then specifically in our program, we also have a teacher training module that we offer teachers in advance. And it's only an hour long. And, you know, the reason it's only an hour long is because teachers tell us that that's what they have time for as well in terms of preparing for a program. So there's compromises every which way in how you best do teacher training. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. Any other? I mean, so as you were talking, so this is linked to another issue. I've just finished, and I highly recommend a book called No Time to Lose. Peter Piot, who's the director of the London School's autobiography. and talking about religious, and nuns in the Congo. And, he was there with the Catholic nuns, and they were busy handing out condoms everywhere. And he said, really? Well, and they said, well, the Congo's a long way from Rome. And I thought that's an interesting, so one of the thoughts that had, I think it was from Marie, sorry, I'm trying to find it, just around sort of, again, we have an idea of a one size fits all, that globally the sort of we're all starting from the same base, and actually that's not the case. And in many contexts, we're starting from very different positions in terms of what understanding even something like, I think the word is like what a menstrual cycle is versus what gender transformative work is. Anybody want to comment on how one adapts and thinks about these things and that was a lot of what this seminar was about, I think. But around this issue of adaptation and how you start at different places in different contexts. Mm-hmm. And that's a very broad question. Anyone want to have a go?
I can certainly speak about it. Does anybody else? Sorry, go on ahead, Hernando.
No, go ahead. I'm going to say if Martin wants to say something, but go ahead, you.
Okay. Well, so Martin, or Mark, sorry, just to clarify, you're just talking about the process of adaptation and the fact that it starts at different places. Is that it?
Quite profoundly different places, I think I would imagine in many cases, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, for me, this experience of adaptation of this program was aided significantly. And, Áine talked about the intervention mapping approach and you touched on it, Mark. But I think that it was vital for this because, and it's, I suppose, for me in the context of being a European person, placing myself as a researcher in the context of Africa also. And although we were working together, with people in those contexts, I think it was extra important there because there's so many factors to consider. There's so many factors to take into account, just even some of the things that we've been mentioning now in terms of the social norms and, the services that are, in operation and understanding the context from many different angles, I guess. So really what I suppose from my perspective, what I was able to bring was my background in social psychology and my understanding of human behavior, and that although that may change across contexts and across countries and within countries indeed, and across sexes, as we all know here today, that, human behavior is largely, I suppose similar. And there are ways that we can target that. And I think approaches like the intervention mapping approach, which really uses behavior change theory, but also broader theory, and also drills down into the different components of an intervention, how you're going to use it within a context, and maps that out. Probably ad nauseum, really, whenever you're in the middle of it. But I think what I'm rambling a bit, but what I'm trying to say is I think in order to sort of to try and manage that in some way, Mark, the fact that adaptation can be so broad and so unyielding, I think that, using a framework like that is hugely helpful and beneficial.
Thanks, Áine. And maybe just to anybody who hasn't looked at intervention mapping, prior to working with Áine, I'd never done it. And there's a level of detail that sometimes can be quite like mind-numbing, but I'm a complete convert. I think it's incredibly, incredibly useful. So I highly recommend that. Martin, did you want to add anything? Because we are running out of time. So yeah.
Yeah, as brief as I possibly can. Whenever we're adapting interventions, we're usually taking an intervention and trying to move it into a different context. But rather than transposing an intervention that was developed somewhere else, it's nice to recognize that where we're going, there's a whole structure there normally. To draw on our example from If I Were a Dad, the prisons themselves, the young men have their own groups and they have a good relationship with youth workers. And there's an existing education system within Polmont in Scotland and Hydebank Wood in Northern Ireland where they're functioning as like secure state colleges. Whenever it comes to adapting an intervention, we'd be remiss not to rely on the young people that we're trying to target with the intervention, the young men themselves, listening to them and asking them how to adapt a program, and to the people that are already existing in that system, in our case, the youth workers, by approaching them and saying, how do you do things in this context, and being more pliable and flexible as researchers and intervention programmers to try and come up with something that's acceptable to the people already in the system and the people whose behavior we want to change. And by doing that, we can hopefully make a program that's deliverable, like we have done with I Were a Dad. We've left it in those prisons, and the youth workers themselves have a lot of buy-in, have developed the program with us, and are quite happy to continue delivering in the prisons as the researchers have left.
Thanks, Martin. I'm going to have to bring it to a close there because we are running out of time. I mean, just to say, I hope that the organizers will be able to share the chat box. I mean, as everyone was talking, there's links, there's websites, there's training manuals, there's just an immense resource there. So if we can make sure that does get shared with participants, or find a way for them to access it. So yeah, thank you to everyone for the questions, and over to you, Hernando.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you to the audience for very good comments and questions. And I don't forget the homework that I put it to you before this. Just one thing, like a brainstorming. What to do to work, to get better work with men. Maria, one thing.
Okay. One is to get to know what men want from relationships.
Okay. Áine.
I think a sense of humor is really, really important, Fernando. A sense of humor.
Okay. Mark.
A frame in approaching boys and men that men are and boys are not the problem, they're part of the solution.
Okay. Martin.
Trust the men and letting them take the leap and they feel empowered to define what they need and make the change themselves.
Yes. Alejandra?
Well, I say that men are part of the solutions, and involving young men is an ethical mandate for all of us, knowing that the final decisions belongs to women.
Okay. Ineka and Chandra?
Boys and men are part of the solution, not only in preventing unwanted pregnancies, but also to have more pleasure in sex and relationships.
Thank you. Chandra.
We blame boys and men, but really all these values about racism, about gender inequality, we teach them at home. So, it's parents, it's societies which teach them. Boys see their fathers beating their mothers. Boys see their uncles ill-treating their aunts. Why are we surprised that they do it themselves? So, before we target boys, let's ask about how our societies are functioning.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I say always to my students or teachers or the people with communities that I work, gender is the topic, the issue for this all time, this time. But to work with involved men is very important to work together. If we doesn't involve men, the gender inequality doesn't change. We need to work with men. So that's the big challenge. And thank you very much to each one of you. And thank you very much to the audience for being here. And we hope we can get together sometimes after this pandemic. And say thank you very much to the Ubuntu Symposium. And thank you very much for this opportunity. We have a lot to work, to think, and to reflect. Thank you very much, and have a good day, good afternoon, good night.